Hey everyone, my name is Waqar. Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are returning subscribers, you might be confused about why this content is a little bit different, or really different from my older content. The short version, I guess, is that I really don't have all that much time to play card games anymore. I still collect them, as you can see back here, but I still have to make time for software engineering stuff because I kind of got to do that for a living. And seeing that since most of my subscribers are friends and family, I've emotionally blackmailed into subscribing to my channel. I figured it's probably easier to just repurpose this channel instead of creating a brand new one. So that being said, for those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Waqar. I'm a senior software engineer at Atlassian. I have been a software engineer for, I think, 8+ years now. Before this, I worked at Google for a couple of years and Microsoft for a couple of years. I've worked at PayPal, Experian, so handful of tech companies, non-tech companies, everything from large tech giants to small shops where I'm one of 2 software engineers. So all that to say, I think I have a little bit of merit when it comes to talking about the topics I want to cover today, which is how, or at least tips to help mid-level software engineers get jobs. Now, just kind of word of caution here, I'm probably not an expert in this area in terms of getting jobs, right? I'm here to offer my help from my anecdotal experiences, which probably applies widely to many software engineers, but everyone's situation is different. I'm sure there are individuals out there who are professionals at helping people get jobs in the software engineering industry and offering advice to them, but that is not me. I'm just here to offer whatever I can to help. So I wanted to make this video specifically for mid-level software engineers. So if you're a senior software engineer already, this probably isn't going to help you. If you're a student trying to get an entry-level job, this probably won't help you either. However, I'm happy to talk about those topics in a separate video, so feel free to comment down below if that's something you are interested in. This video is specifically for people who have been in the industry for maybe a year or so and are looking for a junior or mid-level position after they have a couple of years of experience, or maybe they've done an internship and they're trying to look for a job as a junior engineer. So, I think there are a lot of different topics I want to cover, but I think it can really be broken down into one kind of overarching theme and then maybe 2 separate parts of that. So I think starting off, the major thing that I think as a software engineer trying to look for a new job that you need to kind of figure out is what are your goals? And that is a very broad topic and it's a very complicated topic, but I think if you really think about it in terms of what kind of company you're targeting, that specifically will help you identify how to construct your resume, how to prep for interviews, and so on. And so just going off of that, there are a couple of 3, I think, different parts that I kind of mentioned there. One is your resume, how you construct it. 2 is the interview process. And 3 is how you prep for the interviews. Those last 2 might seem like they're out of order, but that's kind of intentional, and we'll talk more about that. So what do I mean about understanding your goals? Well, the goals can be in a lot of different things, right? Your goal could be, I want to make $500,000 a year. Might not be a feasible goal, a tangible goal, but that is a goal. But so if you want to say, have something a bit more realistic and say, all right, I want to make $300,000. What are the companies that can help you achieve that? Well, you can either work at a tech giant or you can work at a trading firm. But that'll really influence what kind of company you're targeting. But I think more realistic kind of goals that you might want to identify right now is what are the types of companies you want to work at, right? So do you want to work for larger tech companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and so on, Meta, or do you want to work at smaller companies? Nothing's wrong with either one. Just understand that these different companies have, they entail different things. And that also is going to have a big implication on how you prep your interview process. So figure out what type of companies you want and then go apply. I think having a much more targeted approach is going to be a lot more beneficial than kind of just prepping in general. Because again, prepping in general is very different from one company to another, right? Specifically, like these tech companies have a very different interview process. Of course, feel free to prep for everything if that's what you want to do. I just think it'll take a lot longer for you to be ready. You're never going to feel completely ready, but to be ready to interview if you're just kind of blindly just covering all the topics you want to cover. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. So knowing that, let's talk about resumes, right? Resume is obviously the first kind of point of contact you have with the company. The major thing I want to share about resumes, and I'm not going to go over everything. If you are interested in getting some general advice about resumes specifically for software engineering, I think Cracking the Coding Interview has like a great chapter on it. So go ahead and read that. I think it offers some great advice in there. So some of this is just going to be kind of echoing what's already in there. But I see a lot of engineers with less than 10 years of experience having 2 or more pages when it comes to their resume. So your resume should be short and concise, and it should kind of just get to the point, right? Your resume space is very, very valuable. So as an interviewer working at a large tech company or just any company, I'm actually not going to spend all that time looking at your resume, right? Like your resume comes across my table and I'm going to be like, okay, I just need to interview this person. I'll take a brief look at your resume and be like, all right, these are the different areas that you probably are familiar with, so maybe I might probe there. But that's about it. At most, like maybe 2 to 3 minutes that I'm going to spend looking at your resume. The person who's going to spend probably even less time looking at your resume is the recruiter, and they look at a lot of resumes, right? That's the first point of contact. So the recruiter and the hiring manager are the people you really need to wow with your resume. So imagine you're a recruiter, you open up a resume and you just see a giant wall of text that's like 4 pages long. I mean, you're realistically probably not going to want to look at it, right? So make sure your resume is appealing. Make sure it's short and concise. Again, your space on your resume is really valuable real estate. So make sure that everything you're putting on there is really relevant. So going off of that, the first thing that I see people doing a lot of the time is having a summary at the top, summary or an objective section. Honestly, don't think that's necessary. I don't care as an interviewer. I don't care. I'm sure the hiring manager and the recruiter don't care about that as well. What we care about is your work experience. That being said, next point is work experience. Lead with that. If you have work experience already, if you have even a year of work experience, lead with that. I don't care as much about your education. I don't care about anything else. Your work experience takes precedence over everything else. So you start off with your contact information and then work experience. If you want to have a summary, keep it really, really short, and you can put it before the work experience, but it shouldn't be more than a sentence or two. So lead with work experience. I can't emphasize that enough. When it comes to the bullet points for work experience, I'm not going to dive into that. Again, read Cracking the Coding Interview. There's ways on how you can make it really quantifiable and have your bullet points be more impactful. But work experience, lead with that. Have it be in chronological order from current and most recent to oldest. Maybe if you have a lot of work experience, you might want to leave some off if it gets too long, and only leave the ones that are really relevant. All right, so going off of that, education is another one. If you have work experience, don't put your education at top. I see that way too often. I see summary, education, then work experience. Work experience takes precedence. Your education is important. So the most you should have is your degree, where you got it from, when you got it. Those 3 things are pretty much it. Like I said, I have about 8 years of work experience. In the past 5 years, I don't think anyone's ever asked me about my education. I actually don't even have a CS degree. I have a degree in Bachelor's of Liberal Arts and Sciences. But again, no one really cares. I have the work experience. No one's going to ask. So that is pretty much the general advice. Now, when we go back to the topic of understanding your goals and understanding what kind of companies you're targeting, that's really going to influence these last 2 points I want to talk about when it comes to your resume. So the first one is skills, right? This is kind of a controversial topic in terms of, people list out all the different frameworks they've used, all the different languages they've used, all the languages they're proficient in, and so on. That information is important. I would probably put that on your LinkedIn. I don't think it really depends on what kind of company you're targeting. So say, for example, you say, I want to go work at Google. Okay. When you work at Google, when you interview at Google, your interview process is going to be language agnostic. What that means is that they don't care which language you use. You just tell the recruiter beforehand, hey, I'm going to do the interview in C#. I don't think, or at least I should say, most people at Google don't use C#. The majority of them, the vast majority of them, do not use it for work. But you're allowed to do that. Any mainstream programming language at big tech companies, you can use that to interview. And so they really don't care. These larger tech companies, they have a lot of money and a lot of time. So most of the time, and again, I can't say this is going to be 100% of the time, because there are specific niche roles which require specific technologies and languages. But generally speaking, most of these big tech companies have the capacity to bring on engineers and give them a week or 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even a month, to learn the technology. And so what they do is they are targeting engineers they think are just well-rounded, excellent engineers. They want to bring them on, and then the idea is that they will learn the skills on the job. And so just as a quick example, because technology changes all the time, right? Technology will change. I joined Microsoft as a back-end software engineer. I was working in C#. Most of my professional experience until then had been in C#. So I was working in C# for maybe 2 weeks, and then I was told, hey, you're getting reorg, and I got put into a team that was building out a web page in, I think it was Angular. I don't even remember. I think it might have been Angular JS. So I started working in JavaScript. I had a little bit of Node experience before, so I knew some JavaScript, but wasn't really great at it. Shortly after that, a couple months afterwards, I was working in React. And then after that, I was working in Angular. So things are going to change all the time. They just want general, good software engineers. And the expectation is that they'll learn over time. And tools will change over time, and that software engineer will learn on the job over time. That being said, smaller companies don't have that luxury all the time. And so a lot of times they'll want an engineer who is proficient in a language or a framework. So they might say, hey, we want someone who has a lot of Java experience or Spring experience or whatever, right? .NET experience. And so know who you're catering to, right? If you're catering to a smaller company that needs someone with this experience, by all means, put that on your resume. But if you're interviewing with Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and those types of companies, value your resume space, and maybe the skills section isn't going to be important. If you are adding a skills section, make sure, again, work experience will take precedence. Now, if you are interviewing at these big tech companies, that doesn't mean don't include anything about tech stacks, right? Your experience about languages and tech stacks and technologies you've worked with, that should all be baked into your work experience section. So the bullet points you have, you say I accomplished X by doing Y using, Lambda, right? For example. So that should be baked in. So skills really only important for smaller companies, really, I would say. And if you are put them after a work experience. And then the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to resume is, I think, another controversial topic. Which is certs, right? So we're probably all well aware that an industry that's very similar to software engineering is IT. Now, if you're saying IT and software engineering is the same industry, you're probably not a software engineer, which is totally fine, but they are separate industries and completely separate roles. But IT, like, certs are a major part of it, right? And a lot of times they're required by employers or required for kickbacks from vendors and so on. So certifications are a big part of that. However, in software engineering, usually, especially at bigger tech companies, that's not the case, right? Certs are not required. In fact, some people even say that certs are probably count against you when people are looking at it. It might be seen as an incompetency. People might question, hey, why did you do the cert in the first place? So, for example, one of the companies that I interviewed for was a smaller company, I would say mid-sized company, but it wasn't like a tech giant. I think at that point I had like some Windows thing from way back when that I had put on there, some Windows configuration, and I had a SQL Server certification on there. So my SQL at that point, I had to study for that exam, but I put that on there, and then the interviewer asked me what I was trying to do with that cert, what I was trying to pursue, and asked me pretty much why I did it. And the answer was pretty much so I could seem more employable, but I didn't have a great answer. And so be prepared to answer that. Whatever you put on your resume, make sure you can answer for that. But more importantly, again, your work experience is very valuable, and your space on your resume is very valuable. And so again, this should all be baked into your work experience. Like, I don't care if you have an AWS certification, right? Like, I can go study a brain dump for 12 hours, go take some AWS cert exam and probably nail it. Like, that's not going to tell me anything about you. What would tell me something about you is, like, if you say something like, I don't know, like implemented a microservice architecture by breaking down your giant monolithic application into different services using, I don't know, like Lambda, SQS, SNS, and DynamoDB. That has a lot more weight than saying, I have a certification in AWS. Like, okay, cool. So certs, I would honestly leave them off. But again, know which market you're targeting, know what kind of companies you're targeting. If the company you want to interview at says, hey, we need someone who's certified in AWS or Azure or whatever technology, by all means, put that on there. But know that is taking up valuable space. And again, that should probably go at the bottom. So that's kind of all the topics I wanted to cover about resumes. Now, let's talk about the interview process itself, because I think that really influences how you prepare for an interview. So for giant tech companies and a lot of tech companies out there, if you aren't familiar with LeetCode, you probably should be. So LeetCode.com is a website that has a lot of programming questions that are commonly asked at during tech company interviews. And so you can even like buy a subscription and they'll tell you like these are the most commonly asked questions at Google. And from my experience, a lot of that has been accurate. Like when I was interviewing at Microsoft, when I was an interviewer at Microsoft, I was unsure of what questions to ask, and one of my senior software engineer teammates said, just go on LeetCode, pick a medium question and ask that. So, and interviewing at Amazon a couple of times, I've always had at least one question from LeetCode. And so definitely, LeetCode is a big part of that. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, LeetCode is a lot of memorization. It ends up being a lot of, all right, memorize this algorithm, how it works, and the implementation for it. And then it's kind of just like regurgitation during the interview process. So a lot of people are against that because, they're like, it's just memorization. It's not really measuring your competency as a software engineer necessarily. It measures your competency in programming and memorization, and that is, I guess, a valid metric to use while considering who to hire, but it's not necessarily something that translates well into everyday programming practices, right? So, but that is kind of what the industry is like. And so if you're interviewing at these companies, do your research beforehand. There's plenty of resources out there. What is the interview process like? Now, if it's LeetCode, you're going to want to study LeetCode and study it a lot. Read things like Cracking the Coding Interview, know your runtime complexities, your big O notations, your time, space complexities, those kinds of things, and know algorithms, right? You're going to want to know your data structures. I guess data structures are something that applies regardless of where you're applying, what kind of company you're applying to. Know your basic data structures. But for example, when it comes to like Google, they like asking a lot of graph questions. So study your graphs, know different data structures, and then know different algorithms and how to like traverse those graphs, for example. I just, by off chance, during one of my interviews while I was interviewing for Google, I had studied like Dijkstra's algorithm, which is it's like a graph traversal kind of algorithm. But I just like, by off chance, I was like, maybe I should study this like 2 days before the interview. And sure enough, like that was one of the questions. One of the follow-up like scale-up questions was about Dijkstra's algorithm, and I just memorized the runtime complexity of that. So just do your research beforehand. Smaller companies really tend to vary. Like non-tech giant companies really vary on their interview process. So again, do your research, go check on Glassdoor, Blind, Google, whatever. Figure out what their interview process is, because that'll help you kind of prep for what it is. There are a couple of different practices that you'll see within the industry. Some are more practical programming exercises. So they'll tell you, like, if they're in an object-oriented language like Java or C#, they might want to have you implement a class and interface and do something with that. So those are ones I feel like are probably easier, because that's probably something you do every day. Of course, in these, always explain your thought process. Always talk it out before you start coding. General advice for any type of interview, right? The other kind of practice that I see very often is take-home tests, right? So create this and this application within these many days and send it back to us. I typically stay away from those kinds of programming assessments, specifically because they are very much geared only to help me with the interview for that company, right? So if I'm confident in myself saying that I can get like 3-4 interviews and or offers, I want to do something that, I want to invest my time in a way that can help me get job offers from all these companies. Doing take-home tests does not do that. That being said, of course, if the company you are wanting to work at is requiring take-home tests, go ahead and do it, right? I think I actually did end up doing it for PayPal, just because I knew it was a good company. I knew the offer was going to be good, just going off of what people in my network had told me and the reviews I've seen online. So I did the take-home test. But generally speaking, I personally don't do those. But if that's something you need to do, go ahead and do it. So those are mostly the different types of interview processes that I see out there. So that being said, now when it comes to how you prepare for the interview, so we talked a little bit about LeetCode, right? So LeetCode is obviously a very important one if the company uses LeetCode type questions. The other part they might ask is our system design question. Now, system design is a lot broader, right? It probably applies to not only these big tech companies, but also smaller companies as well. Always something nice to know. But system design is very, very broad, right? There's some core technologies you should probably know, like you should know, what the difference between a NoSQL database and a SQL database is, a NoSQL database and a relational database is. I guess more specific, I should say relational databases, non-relational databases. But yeah, you get the point. You should know the differences between them, when to use one versus the other, or at least have some kind of sense of why you would want to use one versus the other. That all being said, if you're interviewing for a mid-level role, a lot of companies just won't expect you to either do the system design interview or do well on them. So it's important to know those topics, but I wouldn't spend too much time on them unless you're going for a more senior role. So system design is another one. Cover those topics as well. To do that, again, there's a really, really wide variety of technologies that you should cover. So, a database is obviously one. Know if you're going for like a full stack or back end, or I guess any kind of software job that requires a web application, know, REST versus SOAP versus Graph. Caching would be nice, but again, there's very broad topics. I'm not going to go into all of them. You can go figure those out as well just by Googling system design topics. But then also understanding, how you're going to prep for them. So we talked about how smaller companies want people with specific skill sets, right? So say a company wants someone with Kubernetes experience, for example. Again, big tech companies probably will not hire specifically people who know Kubernetes. They will hire engineers who are well-rounded and have solid fundamental, for computer science and software engineering, and then they'll bring them on, and then that engineer can learn Kubernetes or whatever technology it is, right? But a smaller company might not be able to have that luxury of having the engineer learn on the job. So if you want to learn Kubernetes, by all means, do that. It's any technology you want to learn for your own enrichment, go ahead and do that. But if your goal is, hey, I just want to get this job, make sure that you're studying the correct topics, right? If you say, all right, I want to interview at a big tech company, grind leak code and system design. Don't go off learning, Kubernetes, SQS, Lambda, all these other things. Granted, again, all these things are important in terms of system design. But specific technologies, you don't really care too much about, right? One other thing, I guess this also goes back to resume building, is people say, hey, make GitHub projects, and like whatever you study, make a GitHub project and throw it on your GitHub and link and put that on your resume. Honestly speaking, if I see your GitHub is linked on there, if I happen to click on it, which I rarely would, and I see that it's just like 20 like Hello World basic projects and you did not do anything to follow up on that, that's probably going to look worse, honestly, than a GitHub that has like one project that's like really fleshed out, like maybe a personal website or some kind of just like quick thing that you threw together just to like learn something. That's different from like just Hello World projects. So no one really cares about your GitHub, to be honest. Put it on there if you want to, unless you have something very impressive. If you have something very impressive with a lot of users, some open source projects you contribute to often that are widely used, by all means, that's great. Link that on there. So when it comes to technology specifically, if you're, say, for example, a Kubernetes expert, like when I say expert, I mean you are an expert in the industry where software engineers come to you for advice from all over. Put that on your resume, by all means. Study that. Get better at it. If your goal is to be a C# expert, study that. But again, if you want to say, I just want to go work at Amazon's not going to care about your C# experience. So really understand what companies you're targeting. Make sure you construct your resume in order to cater to them, and then understanding their interview process, study those relevant topics. The fact of the matter is, being a software engineer, you're never going to know everything. Just accept that right now. There's way too many topics, and technology changes way too often for you to know everything. So, I mean, I get it. I've been there. I shouldn't say we all, but many software engineers have what someone referred to as the hunger. This was back when I was working at Microsoft. I was a junior software engineer. I went to some talk for people who are early in their careers within Microsoft. And one of the executives, I think it might have been, I don't remember who it was exactly. It might have been Jason Zander, who's I think like the VP of Azure, or someone else who spoke after him. They refer to as, they said they want to hire people who have the hunger. And that like immediately clicked with me. Hunger is like, being a software engineer, a lot of us just want to learn everything, want to absorb everything. And that is a great mentality to have. And that is something definitely that you should communicate to your interviewers, hiring managers, recruiters, that you want to learn. However, you're just not going to be able to learn everything because it's never ending and it's always growing. And so just accept that and learn the things that are relevant to the job that you're either at right now or the job you want. And sometimes The things you want to learn may not align with that, and so sometimes you just have to put it off. If you want to do it on your free time, go ahead, but do it with the expectation that it's for your own enrichment and that it's not going to help you with your job search. So again, if you want to learn Azure, if your company doesn't, the companies you're looking at don't care about Azure, if you want to do it, just go ahead and do it. I think learning new technology is fun, but again, do it for yourself, not for the job search. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to cover. I realize I've been talking for 25 minutes now, but I hope this helped. I really hope it does. If you have any questions, any comments, any additional advice that you want, any other videos you want me to do regarding these types of topics, please comment below. I would love to help any way I can. If you think that I'm, full of garbage and I don't know what I'm talking about and everything I said is wrong, also please like, comment, subscribe, and continue to flame me in future videos. No problem with that as well. But yeah, otherwise, I will see you guys next time.